The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Hello everyone, welcome into Students of the Game. My name is Alex Baumann, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Nathan Glidewell. Crazy weekend of football, we're going to dive right into it, starting with an update of the college football coaching carousel here. Just going through some notable hires. Syracuse hired Georgia defensive backs coach Fran Brown to be the university's next head football coach. San Diego State hired Colorado offensive coordinator Sean Lewis to be the university's next head football coach. I use offensive coordinator loosely because Sean Lewis was demoted a few weeks ago, and we covered that in a previous show. Oregon State promoted defense coordinator Trent Bray to be the university's next head coach. Indiana hired James Madison head football coach Curt Cignetti to the same position. Houston hired Tulane head football coach Willie Fritz to the same position. And then Boise State promoted interim head football coach Spencer Danielson to the full-time position. And then just offense coordinator update here. I thought this was pretty funny. I'm pretty sure most people did when they saw this headline come up. Bobby Petrino agreed to become the next offensive coordinator at Arkansas, a team he was fired from as the head coach, I believe, about 10 to 11 years ago. So that was a pretty funny circumstance there. Nathan, out of all those hires I just mentioned, whether it's Fran Brown at Syracuse, Sean Lewis at San Diego State, Trent Bray at Oregon State, Curt Cignetti at Indiana, Willie Fritz at Houston, or Spencer Danielson at Boise State, what was your favorite hire or hire you think should have the most impact on that team in year one?
Yeah, I think Sean Lewis going to San Diego State, when he was in control of the Colorado offense, I thought he did a tremendous job. I just felt like the personnel group wasn't playing to their potential and wasn't executing well, mostly the offensive line. And I'm so confused on how he got demoted. I think that was a pretty stupid decision by Dion. We already covered that on the show. But I'm very confident in what Sean Lewis can do, and I think he'll be a very good head coach for that San Diego State program and get them into a point where they can keep winning. But for Colorado, I think it means more to them because you lose a very, very good offensive coordinator. I don't think you can sit here and say he wasn't an offensive coordinator because he deserves to be called an offensive coordinator. And Dion, I hope he realizes that going into that season, whenever he has to be calling plays for the offense, and it just doesn't work out because Sean Lewis is doing a tremendous job, and now he's gone. So look what you did.
No more scapegoating your offensive coordinator for the fact your offensive line can't block for your pretty princess of a son. That's what he was. Mm-hmm. I honestly think Indiana hit a home run here with the hire with James
that one
Madison,
was also good.
Head football coach Curt Cignetti. I thought he would kind of wait around for a more high-profile job. I know Indiana's in the Big Ten, but you don't think Indiana instantly think football. You think basketball. The football program had that one good year with Tom Allen when he had Michael Penix, and since then it's kind of been a wash, a dumpster fire, if you will. And they go out and hire Cignetti, who has really turned that James Madison football program around. He led them into the FBS here. They had a one-loss season. I mean, he was the Sun Belt Conference Coach of the Year. They're going to play in a bowl game. And that's kind of crazy considering James Madison's this is their second year in the FBS, second or third?
Second. Yeah, second.
So, I mean, he turned that program around. I think he can turn Indiana's program around. And like I said, I think it's the home run hire. And that's kind of crazy for me to say that for Indiana, considering what that football program has been. You would have thought they would have gone out and hired somebody like Syracuse did in Fran Brown. Not saying Fran Brown's not going to be a good head coach. It's just not that high-profile name, kind of like Curt Cignetti is.
Yep.
All right, let's hop right into what happened this past weekend with the conference championships, Nathan. Starting with the SEC, number 1 Georgia taking on number 8 Alabama. Bama ended up winning that game 27-24. Nathan, just dive right into what you saw in this game and what do you think propelled Bama to get that 4 slot by beating Georgia?
Yeah, coming into this game, it was a traditional underdog spot for Bama. It hasn't seen it in a long, long time, but it's starting to become more and more consistent. A lot of people had Georgia in this game. I believe at one time they were favored by a touchdown, which was crazy to see. I think one main thing that I kept an eye on throughout the week was the status of Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers in this game. Both have been dealing with injuries. Of course, Brock Bowers coming off surgery. I don't think he's really looked the same. But they both played in this game. But they definitely didn't play 100%. I think that made an impact on Georgia's offense. But you look at Alabama and what they were able to do on both sides of the ball, the offensive line, defensive line, they out-physical Georgia on both sides of the ball. And that is the main reason why they won this game. You look at Alabama's defense in particular, really just shut down Georgia's running game. Kendall Moulton, only 42 yards. I know he had 2 touchdowns on the ground, but that's also on 13 carries. And then Dejon Edwards, 10 carries for 38 yards. So they took care of business, shutting down the ground game. And then they did give up a few big pass plays, but for the most part, they really just gave Carson Beck hell. The defense was able to get to him sometimes. There was a fumble they recovered, so they were just all over the place. And really, I think the defense was the main reason why they won this game. Helped out a lot with wherever the offense got the ball, wherever the possession started, few possessions started, obviously with the fumble inside the 20, there was one around midfield and so on. So the defense really made the huge difference. And I think the biggest thing for me, I wanted to point out late, even though they gave it a touchdown, they held Georgia at the 1 yard line to 4 downs and really ran a lot of time off the clock, which allowed the Alabama offense to then go on the next possession and run the clock out. So even though they scored, I think that was the drive that was tremendously different and really helped Alabama finish the game. But Jalen Milroe has just been a playmaker. He did things on this game I knew he was capable of. I think back to the LSU game with the dump off pass to Jace McClellan whenever he was about to get sacked. He pretty much did the same thing. He just threw it up to Isaiah Bond like a shovel pass, and they got him a first down, kept the drive going. And they obviously ended up scoring on that drive to really respond to Georgia after they had went down and scored. Isaiah Bond looks like Jalen Milroe's favorite target now. I mean, on that drive, he had like 4 straight catches. So I think that's just the biggest difference. Jalen Milroe is a lot more confident. This Alabama team has a ton of momentum, and it's going to be fun to see what they can do. But both these teams are great. I mean, I truly believe that this Georgia team, give them another year, they're going to be right back in this scenario. And right now, I think they're the 4 best teams in the country. Both these teams, just Georgia took a loss at the wrong time.
Yeah, I looked at Alabama in this game, and Miller got off to a rough start. The defense sort of gave up that early touchdown in the initial possession for Georgia. But once again, the coaching staff made the changes necessary. Tommy Rees started implementing that zone read more, getting Jalen Miller outside the pocket. Kevin Steele for the defense really schemed up a good plan there. Nick Saban went over that about how they switched up the front, how they switched up the safety look. So they made the necessary adjustments. And it felt like for Georgia, especially in the offensive side of the football, Mike Bobo really got away with, had success on that first drive. And I'm not sure why he got away from it. I don't know if he didn't like what he saw for Alabama's defense or if he thought it could do something better, but he just got away from it. I thought the Georgia defense did a really good job of keeping Jalen Milroe's scrambling ability under control, held him to 29 rushing yards. That was due to the 2 spies I had on him, which at the end of the day, which was extremely detrimental to their coverage. We saw it multiple times. And honestly, in my opinion, that was one of the reasons they ended up losing this game was the fact they put 2 spies on them. And that once you take away two players in coverage or blitzing the passer, I mean, you're leaving players on islands, and that's what happened, especially on that Isaiah Bond comeback route that Gary Danielson spent about the entirety of the rest of the game talking about how that wasn't a catch. And, he just liked to harp on everything Alabama does wrong and gets bailed out for.
Well, we don't have to listen to it anymore. That was the final SEC on CBS game. So I hope everyone enjoyed listening to Gary Danielson, not knowing what he's talking about.
Yeah, but I thought Georgia's defense played their tails off. Jalen Walker, I mean, that dude was a stud. He was all over the place, 2 sacks, 2 TFLs. But I'd like to give a compliment to that Alabama offensive line. Jaden Roberts at right guard has been an absolute stud there. Him alongside J.C. Latham at right tackle have been amazing. Caden Proctor's progressed as well. It just feels like Seth McLaughlin is the weakest point of that offensive line. I mean, I'm pretty sure Jalen Milroe would be a great catcher for the Crimson Tide baseball team. The amount of awful snaps he gets. I mean, he's having reach over here, down here, over here. I mean, he's everywhere. He's having to catch mistimed snaps. I mean, credit to Jalen Milroe. He's doing a lot out there. But Nathan, we did see Kool-Aid McKinstry go down with a concussion. There's no notification.
That's another big thing because I believe Jalen Key came in. No, Jalen. It was
It was Trey Amos.
Trey Amos came in. And instantly just made plays. He almost had a pick. The number of picks Carson Beck almost during this game,
Should have
I think
had 4.
4 interceptions. But and that's another difference maker that we can talk about, how this Alabama defense didn't really execute on that side of the ball as far as like getting as many turnovers, but they did get one. But I think another team you got to talk about special teams. Will Reichert, he became all-time winning points scorer in college football history. So big congrats to him. But when it comes down to being able to execute on field goals, getting points on possessions that might look glum or it's like you're out of field goal range, Will Reichert comes up huge, a huge big congrats to James Burnap. The way he played in this game really kept Georgia's offense pinned deep in their own territory, which really helped the defense a lot of the time. So what it comes down to, I think that it's just a mix of everyone just doing their job, and Alabama just executed better. But huge credit to Georgia's defense because they really played. They played good enough to win. I will say that it came down to pretty much offense versus offense, and Alabama just executed better.
In these type of games, it's who makes the mistakes, who makes the most mistakes, and unfortunately for Georgia, it was them. It was the missed field goal early by their, I believe, freshman kicker, right?
Yes.
And then he had the fumble by Carson Beck on that handoff. So Georgia inevitably ended up making the most mistakes. I don't want to take David Pollock route and say Alabama didn't win this game, Georgia lost this game, Georgia beat Georgia, because that's not what happened. Alabama won this game, regardless of how you see it. They forced that turnover. They played to win the game and they won it. It's not the fact Georgia cost themselves the game, anything like that. All right, let's move on, Nathan, to the Pac-12. Number 5, Oregon taking on number 3, Washington.
Last Pac-12 game.
Last Pac-12 game, or I guess, because it's going to be the Pac-2 next year. But Washington won that game 34-31. Another narrow win for Washington as they won on a field goal last week against Washington State. Nathan, the committee continued week after week to put Oregon above the likes of Texas and Alabama, who are now in the college football playoff. And you saw what they did against Washington, losing both times. Did they deserve to be above Texas and Alabama after all? Were they fraudulent? And then what did you see from Washington in this game that proved that they're one of the best 4 teams in the country and deserve to be this?
I think the start, Oregon's not a fraudulent team. They were just put in a scenario by the College Football Committee and put on this pedestal above teams like Alabama and Texas. When really they should have been behind to start with. Their resume was not comparable. The only reason they were there is the eye test, but they had not really played anyone huge. And I think Utah. That should have been, that should have been taken into account by the committee. But the committee had messed up a lot this year, and we'll talk about what they did here in a second. But Washington, they just executed better. They were the better team. Oregon was putting themselves in scenarios to really just take the lead and win this game, but every single time Washington would respond. Washington's defense would get stops. They forced an interception right after Michael Penix had forced an interception, really got that possession back for him. I think the biggest thing for me is the way Washington shut down Oregon's run game and just held Jordan James to only 35 yards on the ground on 5 carries. I know he had a touchdown. Bucky Irving only had 9 carries for 20 yards. But really, Bo Nix was the factor on the run game. 6 carries for 69 yards. Their leading rusher. I felt like Bo Nix played his heart out in this game. I know a lot of people will give him flack for that interception. And I think it really just comes down to Oregon's defense not being able to stop that Washington offense. Michael Penix's connection with Rome Odunze and the rest of his receivers is just something special. And they play out of their mind. Dylan Johnson on the ground, 20 carries, 152 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, as well as a receiving touchdown. He's a dog. Passing. But it's just crazy. To see someone like that have a performance in that big of a game. And that's just a difference maker. I think Washington's offense was able to execute way better than Oregon's offense. And their defense was able to get stops when it mattered. and that's why they won the game. Oregon is a great football team. And I think that if you play this game out 10 different times, I mean, it's going to be split down the line. 5 wins for Washington, 5 wins for Oregon, because they just match up that well. And you can make an argument that Oregon is a top 4 team in the country. I think you can make that even though they lost 2 games, but it comes down to wins and losses sometimes, and you can't lose 2 games to get into the college football playoff. We've seen that time and time again. So it's going to suck because Oregon's losing to Bo Nix, which was really a Heisman contender. I think, gosh, I don't know. I don't want to call Heisman yet.
I mean, it's really between 2 people that aren't even in the college football playoff right now, and Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels. So that's really not going to be a motivator there for the award voters.
Yeah.
And you look at Washington. You think Pac-12. You don't immediately think defense, but Washington has played pretty good defense these past few weeks and pretty much all season. I know they didn't record a sack, but they did, like you said, Nathan, a pretty good job of shutting down that Oregon run game that's been pretty dominant all year with Bucky Irving and Jordan James. They really held Bo Nix in check for the most part. And I really thought the defense was the difference in the game, like you said, Nathan. But I also like to point out for Washington, the running game with Dylan Johnson. I mean, he's been a sight for sore eyes for Washington fans because they really had to rely on Michael Penix a lot earlier in the season. And then Dylan Johnson got really comfortable later. And we've seen him blossom into that great running back that Washington's been missing for forever. And I think he's one of the best running backs Washington's had in a minute. And he's really helped Michael Penix out, not putting all the pressure on that passing game to, hey, it's 3rd and 2. We have to pass the ball here because we have no running game. And Dylan Johnson gives him that ability to do that. And also the offensive and defensive lines, not as much as Alabama's did, but similar to Alabama's, really dominated both sides of the football. And I think they did a great job throughout the game stopping Oregon on offense, like we both said. All right, we're just going to talk about one more game for our conference championship here, that being number 4, Florida State, taking on number 14, Louisville in the ACC championship. Florida State ended up winning this awful game, 16-6. I was thinking about what you said about the Arkansas-Mississippi State game earlier in the year, Nathan, where you said it was like watching somebody kill or bludgeon somebody with a dull spoon or something.
Yes.
That was this is kind of what that was. I mean, Florida State won, but it was hard to watch.
Yeah. Going into we'll talk about college football playoff because Florida State got left out, even though they went undefeated and won their conference. I think the difference maker was the committee watching this game because third-string quarterback Brock Glenn, 8 of 21, 55 passing yards, and had -6 yards due to sacks. When you look at a team and they really struggle, I know their defense came up huge, had an interception. The defense played out of their mind. The defense is caliber to be in the playoff. But really, I mean, Florida State relied a ton on the running game. I know they're able to do it here with Lawrence Fafili and Trey Benson on the ground. But when you look at the quarterback making that big of a difference, I think that's the real reason they got left out. I mean, if Jordan Travis was in, I think they'd be going in. But just knowing that this Florida State team really wouldn't be able to compete well against the Michigans or Washington or anything like that, I think you have to take that into account that the quarterback makes a difference. Louisville in this game, I think their defense played good enough to really to win. But the fact that Louisville's offense,
don't even.
Jack Plummer is awful. Threw a pick in the red zone. Really just changed the
I
game
called
right
it
there.
too. I called it.
I know. I originally said as soon as Louisville had gotten that punt I don't even know what that was. They sacked the punter inside the red zone.
Yeah,
they get the ball. And I was like, Louisville's offense should come out here on first down and kick a field goal to take the 3 before something bad happens. And as soon as I said that, third and goal or third down, Jack Plummer throws it to the defense, and that basically changed the game right there. Put Louisville's offense in the bad spot. They struggled to get in the red zone. They struggled to move the ball at all, and really just fumbled that possession and really just lost the game right there. It's sorry because Louisville throughout the season they've been a special team, but they could not execute in this game. You got to give a ton of credit to Florida State's defense, Jared Verse in particular. I mean, dudes everywhere. Braden Frisk, gosh, he was in the backfield every single time you're watching the game. I really think Florida State is a top 4 caliber team with Jordan Travis, but you look at this game in particular and the game against Florida when they don't have Jordan Travis, and it's a difference maker. You're not going to throw Florida State without Jordan Travis is not one of the best 4 teams, and that's just what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think Florida State's defense, like you said, Nathan, played out of their mind in this game. 7 sacks, 14 TFL, so the interception in the red zone, regardless of if Jack Plummer just gifted it to him. I mean, they got it. So they like you said, Nathan, they're a top 4 defense caliber in the country right now. But the offense, Rockland really didn't give them any help and any leeway with the committee in that regard with how poor he played. But Louisville, I mean, you easily could have won this game if Jack Plummer wasn't your quarterback. I think Plummer fits him really well because that's what he'll be doing in the next year, being a Plummer. I mean, dude he honestly played worse than Brock Glenn. I mean, as a starter, you're supposed to come out there and do good. But dude looked out of his depth. Dude looked like a D3 quarterback at Louisville. I don't know if he didn't prepare for the game, if he ate too much food before the game. I don't know if he had to take a pee break and he was in the middle of the drive or something. I mean, I don't know. Dude looked awful. I mean, the interception he threw, I don't know what he's looking at, if he needed to get his eyes checked, but he threw it right to the Florida State player. I mean, Joey Gatewood was nowhere near open. I don't know what he saw. He was like Sam Darnold seeing ghosts. Awful. I don't usually say a player single-handedly cost you a game, but I honestly think Jack Plummer single-handedly cost Louisville this game because that defense played well. Jawar Jordan has played great all season. He did the best he could. I mean, Jamari Thrash did drop a few passes, but good Lord, Jack Plummer can't throw the football properly. I don't know how he's a quarterback in D1 at Louisville. I really don't. I feel sorry for the rest of that team. All right, just to recap the other 2 Power 5 championships here. Texas beat Oklahoma State 49-21 and secured their spot in the college football playoff. And then in a snooze fest, Michigan beat Iowa 26-0. I mean, Iowa, Lord have mercy. I think they crossed the 50-yard line like maybe 4 times, if that. It was a hard watch if you decided that you were going to sit down and watch that game instead of the Louisville Florida State game. But I think you probably went wrong.
Now that's one of the games where you're just checking the score at halftime and looking to see how many yards Iowa has. And I think when I checked, the quarterback had like 9 and the running back had 6, and it was like in the second quarter. So at that point, I was like, nah, not turning this game on.
I mean, with Iowa in it, you already know there's no offense played for them. I mean, it's a dumpster fire there. I hope Brian Ferentz has enjoyed his last hurrah as the Iowa offensive coordinator. Some other scores from the conference championships. Conference USA, number 24, Liberty beat New Mexico State 49-34, and that ended up clinching their spot in the New York Six there. The American Athletic Conference SMU beat number 22, Tulane 26-14. Then the Sun Belt, Troy beat Appalachian State 49-23. Good job for Troy there. In the MAC, Miami, Ohio beat Toledo 23-14. And in the Mountain West, Brian Harson's old stomping ground, Boise State beat UNLV 44-20. Nathan, after we went over these scores here, let's hop into the notable bowl games discussion here with the CFP. In the Rose Bowl, you had number 1 Michigan taking on number 4 Alabama, and in the Sugar Bowl, you have number 2 Washington taking on number 3 Texas. Florida State was obviously left out in favor of teams like Alabama and Texas. Do you agree with the committee there in their ranking of Alabama and Texas above a team like Florida State, who's been unbeaten all year?
I do agree, and I have bias to a point because I am an Alabama fan, but the committee, they came out and I believe this commissioner said that their job is to put the best 4 teams in, and this was a week before the conference championships. So really they hadn't done it in the past. It's really been the 4 most deserving in the past, but for this year they put in the 4 best teams. And I think they got it right. I think really Florida State, I mean, if you put them in, then you're going to have people talking about how Alabama was a better team and they should have been in. And this is just the way it is that Florida State got left out, and people are rightfully arguing that they should have been in. This was a perfect year to have a 12-team playoff. Florida State deserved to be in. I believe Alabama deserved to be in. I think these really, you can argue that Georgia deserved to be in too. They played a hell of a regular season. They just came short in a conference championship. So
Ohio State too.
Yeah, Ohio State. Missouri, I think is a great team. They would make a lot of magic happen. This was a perfect year for a 12-team playoff, and it's just sad because we have to wait till next year to see it. But the circumstances where undefeated Power 5 team who wins a conference championship is left out. It's sad. But it really just shows you that Alabama, the committee thought Alabama was just that better of a team to put them in over Florida State. But it's really it's a lose-lose situation for the committee. They really couldn't do anything right in this scenario, but they put the best 4 teams in my opinion.
Yeah. As much as I'm an Alabama fan, I just can't understand the fact that Florida was not in the top 4. They're undefeated. They beat LSU. They beat Florida. The ACC has a better record against the SEC. They have a winning record for that matter. Florida State, I know their strength of schedule wasn't as good as Alabama's, but they beat the teams they're supposed to beat. They won their conference. They're undefeated. It's the first time a conference champion that's undefeated hasn't made or hasn't got a shot at the championship. And I think it was 04 Auburn didn't get a shot when they were undefeated. So it's the first time this has happened. I know Jordan Travis isn't the quarterback. He's out for the season. Tate Rodemaker, the backup, we don't know if he would have been able to play that game or not. I think he probably would have been available. If not, Brock Glenn would have gone. But I just can't fathom. I'm putting myself, if that was Alabama there and they were undefeated and they had just won the SEC and they put Florida State in over them because they had they beat number 1 Clemson, I'd be a little bit angry at that. I really would. I put myself in Florida State fan shoes, and I see where they're coming from. I wanted to see Florida State in there. I know they're not. You wouldn't consider them, Nathan, a top 4 team in the country, but they play like it all season. They won the games they're supposed to win, so I think they were deserving to be in that top 4. But this was a difficult year, and like you said, Nathan, the committee couldn't do anything right. If they would have left at Alabama, there would have been an uproar from Bama fans saying, "Hey, we had the best win in the country." If you would have left out Texas and somehow put Alabama in over them, it would have been the Texas fans saying, "Hey, we beat Alabama earlier in the season. We won our conference championship. We blew that team out. Why aren't we in?" Florida State looked like crap in their game. I mean, they couldn't do anything right in this scenario. And unfortunately, Florida State got the short end of the stick, which, like I said, it's just really unfortunate. And I personally would have had Florida State in over Alabama and Texas. I would have had Florida State at 3 just because they're undefeated and they won the games we're supposed to win.
Yeah, and I can argue because they deserve to be in. It's a terrible scenario. But this is what it looks like: Michigan versus Alabama in the Rose Bowl, Washington, Texas in the Sugar Bowl. I think we can probably wait till next week to break those games down and talk about that. But you look at the New Year's Six games. I think the most notable for me is in the Orange Bowl, Florida State playing Georgia. I think that's probably the best matchup. Cotton Bowl is pretty good. Ohio State and Missouri. Peach Bowl, Penn State taking on Ole Miss. And then in the Fiesta, Oregon playing Liberty. Out of those games, Alex, which is the best to you?
I think it has to be Florida State and Georgia because Florida State fans are saying, "Hey, we deserve to be in." I was just clamoring for them to be in. Well, if they're supposed to be in, then you got to go out there and handle business against Georgia, regardless if Brock Bowers or Ladd McConkey play, and Florida State, regardless if Jared Verse and all those players play. You got out there and handle business against Georgia. You have that. You can sort of legitimize your argument, and maybe next year, or I know it's 12 teams next year, but say, hey, there's an ACC team clamoring to get in over an SEC team. You can go, hey man, we proved it last year. Say Florida State is in that scenario. Hey, we proved it last year. We beat Georgia. I mean, that's sort of going to be their claim to fame, so to say, if they were able to handle business against Georgia, and they have to kind of prove that point.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. It's kind of like a scenario last year when Alabama was left out and they were at 5 and they had to go take on the Big 12 champ Kansas State, the team that had beat TCU, who had made the college football playoff. And Alabama took care of business, and they really proved the committee that they were probably the better team. They should have went in. And I don't know if that had factored into going this year. It really shouldn't have. That was last year. But it really makes a statement to say that you were one of the best 4 teams and you got robbed. So. But all the other ones are good too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a bad bowl game this year. And just to point out some bowl games from teams in the state of Alabama, Music City Bowl, Auburn takes on Maryland. Auburn versus Tagovailoa, we've seen that before. I'm kind of excited to see how that turns out. In the Birmingham Bowl, Georgia Tech takes on Troy. That'll be a good matchup there. New Orleans Bowl, Jacksonville State takes on Louisiana Lafayette. So those are the teams from Alabama, outside of Alabama, taking on teams in a bowl game this year. And like Nathan said, next week we'll dive more in depth with the CFP matchups there. It will also start covering some college basketball games. for Alabama, Auburn, and more teams around the country as we start to
Lock
get into
in.
more interesting matchups. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening and watching, students of the game.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.